year we have 38 students with a median age of 26, and in the future we anticipate that that number will rise to 120. That number falls within the university's self-imposed limit on graduate students and all the members of colleges, so the vast majority have their accommodation either college or university accommodation. Secondly, we are conducting research into what works in public policy. Much academic research is focused on what doesn't work and picks apart failures. We are resolutely trying to find across the globe examples of policy that really has a positive impact and changes things for the better, and to learn from that and to share that learning. There's no presumption in the school that the UK, or for that matter, any developed country, has something unique to teach other countries, especially those in the developing world. We're looking worldwide for examples and trying to encourage that exchange of knowledge and ideas. We have and will maintain a faculty whose research and advice is regularly called upon by world leaders. Thirdly, we are seeking to create and sustain networks of senior policymakers who can learn from each other. For example, we're bringing together a group of ministers and senior officials from many countries who are seeking to deal with the so-called resource curse and make the most of the current and future generations from their country's natural resources well, through a week-long course that we're running later this year. I guess the last thing to say about the school is why Oxford. Before the foundation of this school, there was no major school of public policy in Europe. All the recognised graduate teaching took place in the USA, and although there are outstanding schools like the Kennedy School at Harvard or the Wilson School at Princeton, they tended to be rooted in US experience and have strong US focus. Thanks to the philanthropy of Blavatnik, who has contributed the funding to the school, Oxford now has a unique opportunity to provide a school that's global, multidisciplinary, and practical in its focus, and we are trying to achieve that through the work of the school. So we're currently based in temporary accommodation in Merton Street. It's not a sustainable premise for the future work of the school, as we've no space for our growing research programme, and we are unable to convene major meetings there. The facilities for our students are also significantly constrained. So that's why we're proposing a new building in the Radcliffe Observatory Quarter, which can accommodate the school's full programme of activities. The building is jointly funded by our benefactor, Mr. Blavatnik, and by the university. And in this regard, I think it's fair to say that Mr. Blavatnik stands in the long tradition of Oxford philanthropists who have committed to new initiatives and to high-quality architecture. In the introductory to his book, the reference text, I guess, on Oxford architecture, Geoffrey Tyre wrote the following: "Few cities contain more magnificent buildings within a relatively small area than Oxford. More than 8 centuries of lavish architectural patronage, combined with the institutional continuity of the university, have ensured that a moderately sized English provincial town has been adorned with buildings worthy of a capital city. Oxford is one of the great cities of the world simply because of its architecture." The plot that we're talking about this evening sits on the Radcliffe Observatory Quarter, which, as many of you will know, was purchased by the university from the Hospital Trust in 2004. The university obviously made a significant investment in that site, and it has been designated for educational buildings. So as a charity dedicated to education, the university has an obligation to use the site for those purposes, and that's partly what the Blavatnik building is all about. It's worth recalling that in order to prepare the site for the new building, the university undertook the demolition of the previous hospital buildings, which, as those of you recall, a particular area of the site that we're going to talk about this evening, were rather jumbled in their appearance onto Water Street and did not necessarily have a plan or architectural feel to them. We are very conscious that given that this is a site which is the first point to which you will encounter the Radcliffe Observatory Quarter as you come off Walton Street, we in many respects will act as the gateway to that new quarter, and as the architects I'm sure will explain in just a moment, aspects of the design reflect a conscious awareness of the need to invite people in to the new university quarter. That's all I have to say about the school. I'll hand over to my colleagues to talk a little bit about the architecture and look forward to taking any questions you have in due course.
Thanks, Colin. It's very nice to be here. I'm John. We'd like to spend the time tonight just kind of taking you through maybe some of the design decisions that we took when we considered the design of the Blavatnik School in Dublin. This is the site, as you're aware, in the north of Oxford, founded in Walton Street, which which is obviously part of this larger framework of concerns which we took on board when addressing the master plan issues. This wall was previously on the site, the infirmary, which has now since been removed, and currently the situation is a brownfield site, which we're adding. Part of the issue that we face here, obviously, is this burgeoning development of the observatory quarter and the Walton Street streetscape, which we feel has got character that is worthy of preservation, certainly. As these shots show, it's a varied character, different realms of residential running up through the street and modulations in scale throughout, so looking south towards the site.
But I guess one thing that always struck us as well, of course, when we first encountered the site when it was already cleared, and the kind of domestic quality of Walton Street, walking up, it's very residential quality of terrace houses. Some of them come to the sidewalk, others even have recessed entries. It's a very kind of scaled environment. That if you would look at the street frontage, it is very much a corridor, the domestic corridor that leads up to the Oxford Press area. And when we then encountered this site, which was cleared at the point, what always struck us was that, and maybe the next slide is that when you come out of this Walton Street domestic kind of corridor, even when you already see hints of the press and St. Paul's, so we can refer to it as Freud, you still have this idea of this continuing street edge, but then when you go just a few meters further, all of a sudden it widens and opens up and almost becomes civic in scale. And partially the site is cleared right now, and the support is a wonderful heritage of the art. The graphical symmetry of the Freud building, which is, I understand correctly, a Greek temple replica. You have also the Somerville College extension that marks the other side, the south side of the site. So in a sense, it's clear side of these two historical bookends in the Somerville College and the Freud's building, facing this highly ordered Oxford Press building, which we felt was kind of a striking transition from this kind of more domestic Walton Street arrival. When you pass this site, and these are all things that you know, you live in this community, when you pass this site, you immediately again encounter this more residential, domestic scale, corner shops, a few years ago, helping like beautiful homes, yes, on the left side, and then immediately you go back into these dimensions. So this is something that we think is incredible kind of experiences Walton Street really.
Yes. And in considering this, we started with the master plan. The master plan anticipated the rectilinear volume on this site, which seems to make sense in the context of this picture. However, when we started to really engage with this image of the site, it raised certain questions for us that we began to explore. You know, the plot itself has a critical location on the corner between, on one hand, the quarter and the street, and modulating, I suppose, the transition between the two environments specifically that we wanted to sort of deal with the scale of Walton Street and deal with the scale of the university buildings within the quarter. The master plan where we began gave us various constraints, gave us a plot line which was a rectilinear form, such as this: setbacks from the street edge, setbacks from the adjacent buildings, and the main routes from the quarter through to Walton Street. In terms of the building itself, what we had to locate within, there was a very key educational need that was to go into this building. When we brought these two things together, the form that was being generated out of this combination was becoming a certain bulk and a certain mass, and it challenged some of our preconceptions in terms of the form of the building. Now, these images that are illustrations really of an unarticulated bulk of that nature located in the Walton Street. This alerted us to certain issues concerning scale, certainly, concerning openness of Walton Street. This new intervention on Walton Street, bridging between the quarter and Walton Street, we felt should be almost like a valve between two different scenarios, that of the more instant nature of the quarter and the more transient and street-like nature of Walton Street. So, for instance, the wall at the front, we began to consider more open aspects of the site. We began to make most of the public grounds and civic space. However, the bulk was something we had real issues with as an appearance.
Also, that we found on the clear side. Somehow when we explored this, what we call zero lot line building, essentially when we go to the edge and extrude the program, we felt no longer had any of these found qualities in terms of the widening of the street and therefore having Freud as well as the Somerville Extension College as these bookends facing the press. So somehow this is something we, in parallel to this massing exercise, of course we're also thinking about the internal organization. But so these were two things that were going on in parallel. But what we did feel from these exercises was that the zero lot line approach was not grabbing the potential this site was offering to its fullest.
And then I guess to build on that, when we began to think about what the university building needs to house, how it is meant to, we became more fluid in our thinking, and we wanted to introduce a bit of fluidity on how people communicate from the building to the actual form of the building. We also looked at shapes in the environment. Actually, a rectangular shape doesn't necessarily sit with the context, and there's plenty of examples of other shapes occupying spaces to create public space around them. In terms of geometry, we began to combine the program within the building, the function of the building, and the various floors. And we considered a dynamic of this shifting floor plates. So what we want to do is minimize the footprint at ground level, so we can maximize the public space available. And then we examined each floor plate of the building to be appropriate to its function. So research, education, moving up through the building in some offices to the culminating point, which is the library building, which is the kind of apex and the center of study of the building.
So I think that it also has something to do with the School of Government, of course. If you go back to this diagram where you see these various functions that often in schools are striated or filled up in a kind of hierarchical fashion. What we really wanted to achieve with this school is that communication became very key, like a goal of arranging this program was that there was a lot of internal communication. So from an internal space planning point of view, that's why we show this glue, if you will, between these programs as this forum, and this is kind of just an ideogram. But the fluidity that John talks about from this internal space planning point of view, we also see that from an urban point of view is where we see the connection between Walton Street and the local setting into this kind of new to be developed ROQ. So there too we want to do this communication between these two elements.
So the building, as it sits on the site, it is the stacked form, and it is other than directly uniform, but it still operates within the boundaries of the adjacent buildings and the street edge. I think in the interior, to pick up on what Simon said, we wanted to introduce also that fluidity, that notion of communication throughout the building, both as an external identity, but also as an internal identity as well. So this is the main forum space. You can see the communication around the various floors and the two library buildings at the top, which admit light down into the space.
So I actually go really quickly back to the second order as well, because it might explain a little bit to some of you all the geometries that this building has. What we did essentially is we took the lot lines, and we always, in the first circular plate here, which is on street level, we essentially took 3 points that define the circle. And the 2 points on the sides go to the 0 lot line, and the third point goes to the middle along the lot line on Walton Street. And that gave us a circle that sits in the front of the site. And the circle steps to the front because, quite literally, we kind of want to pick up the public that comes up on Walton Street. The second geometry we initially had as a circle as well, which is then the first level, houses kind of like large teaching and student programs. During the process, straight space there, which I'm sure you've seen by now, which we did for 2 reasons. One was actually because we feel that this Walton Street terraced housing edge, you cannot, when we just put a pure circular building on that side, it was not really anchored to the portico of St. Paul's, neither to this kind of line that came up from Walton
And I
Street.
think you can see this in the circle.
But and the other reason for the straight line was actually to bring the student program to the street, because obviously when that means a circle, it's not necessarily the most open geometry. So that's why the straight line became very important, because you actually brought this large teaching program to the pavement, if you will, to the passerby.
Okay. So then we end up with a situation of the circular building, and we tested them against the sort of presumed master plan arrangement. I think that one thing that became clear and of benefit to us certainly was the circular form released more public realm to the plot generally. It also provided that fluidity of space between the two conditions that we were very keen on doing, and really using this corner location to its best potential. In terms of height and the stacking of the relationships of use, we wanted to put the library floors on the top 2 floors. They were to serve as the kind of civic identity on the top. This void space doesn't simply cut down through the building in a linear form. It is a dynamic movement through the building. You want the building to appear dynamic and quite vibrant in that respect. And this emphasizes that the striking nature of the top drum. In terms of the view onto Walton Street with the points to the left here, you see what Simon was talking about earlier was this kind of arrangement of planes that modulate the scale from the street up, culminating in the library which recesses into the back of the site. This straight bar forms the street line link between the lower scales. We tested this again against the more, so we say, bulky form of a rectilinear form. And we felt certainly that this was the circular form as it peeled away from the site edges was more positive in its conditioning of the site and the notion of moving through and between them. I don't know how clear this is, but the situation appears different certainly when you're considering a circular building and you flatten it out. This shows the flattening elevation, and you can see the lighter scale of the smaller scale drum and upper floors are lighter, they recede into the background. The harder lines of the front-facing street addressing and geometries are more apparent here, but to get the full understanding of the circular building, obviously, it is a quality on its own. In terms of how the height is modulated through the site and through the Walton Street, one thing that we really wanted to preserve, obviously, was a stepping and a cascading of scale to Walton Street, but at the same time addressing the emerging scale of the observatory quarter. One thing that we were keen about, and this raises the issue of the car parks where we go over it, is that if we were to go over it, which we do, we wanted to go over it with a function, with an identity, with a distinction with form, which is the circular drum on top. And we didn't want to use any masked plant bundles, for instance, or we wanted to create a sort of significant moment for that intention. This then obviously raises the issue of distinct views and the car park site issues. These were a number of series of distinct views we took at the time when this site issue was becoming something that we wanted to obviously engage with. This one from Raleigh Park is a prescribed point. You see the ESG off to the left and St. Mary's Tower to the right. Zooming in on that, it's apparent that this building is visible. We wanted to engage with that visibility. We wanted it to be a significant civic building of exceptional quality. And regardless of height, it's visible. And the white lines here represent the context of the observatory portrait and the buildings that have yet to occupy this space. Also, at this point, the circular form that we introduced really began to make sense, and it does make sense in this relationship. If we were to go to complex, which we were, we didn't want to do so with a rectangle. And I think as we speak about the facade later on in the presentation, it becomes clear that the material nature of the circular form is a principal driving quality in the building frame. Again, some more towers. This is from Fort Meadows view. You zoom in on it, and as you can see, the top of the building is visible. And from Boris Hill. So you can see it just here, behind that tree cover. I think the fact of its visibility was something that we wanted to bring into the local context of the design quality as well. We want it to be a recognizable moment in the landscape. In terms then of the positioning of the building, we also felt that the focused attention to Walton Street should be one which directly addresses the frontage and the street line that follows up from the south, and then is recessed back from the Freud's building to the north. And these are a few images of that cascading relationship, that stepping back relationship that moderates between the two, identifying the scales of the building of the court in Walton Street. So this is obviously, these are images incidentally that these were our design tools that we used to sort of test scale and see the effect of different volumes on the site. They're not verified images. So this is looking north, you see Freud's, you see the press building to the left. Looking south, then you see Freud's, you see our building recessing, and you see more on the existing context. You perceive a flow of movement around the building. We also tested within as well, the views from within the building site are presented to the outside. So, Freud's to the right there, our building to the left. There's an almost, again, a reduction in scale because of this stacking element sort of brings in a more domestic quality at the street side.
Well, this, for example, also is a view where you have the cafeteria program for students that you want to place next to the Freud's cafe area. And that's also why this horizontal bar and the stage is shaded overhead. So we like the fact that this stacking exercise, as John said, creates moments like on urban scale, but also on a kind of pedestrian scale. It brings down to the kind of human scale.
And and some suggestions of public realm aspirations, opportunities that maybe this form allows. And this is from within the RFQ. I won't dwell on these because they're very diagrammatic in nature. This is from within the RFQ, looking at the north-south to the rear of the DSG. And then this is the view really that is effectively framed. We were quite pleased with the way it opened up these vistas. In terms of materiality, I mean, the local limestone, the general grain and character of Oxford we wanted to obviously engage with. We're using, within this building, we're using glass, that's apparent. We're using masonry elements, precast masonry elements, which will be tailored to have a relationship to the existing limestone. The glass we're using is not. We're using the glass in certain and specific modules, which is faceted around the skin of the building. Those modules are, it sets up a rhythm which it does not present the glass as a sheet to the building, an anonymous sheet which effectively presents a fully reflective surface. We're using glass as a material form to modulate this drum condition and to play on the variation and reflection that will give, which kind of addresses the scale of the drums. So these are verified independent images, which we didn't produce these. We give these to someone to produce and develop an impression of the building. So these are the actual. This is the actual predicted quality of that skin, of its relationship to its sunlight, local context being reflected in certain aspects of these facets, and the sort of overall material dynamic.
Just as a quick add-on, this is also a glass that performs as a double skin. Mm-hmm. So the advantage, of course, is that our carbon footprint can be managed because we are getting full advantage of natural ventilation by cutting the heat gain with this double skin. But from an architectural kind of facade visibility point of view, it gives us the opportunity to make this exterior glazing free of any hardware or clutter, mullions, the kind of things you associate often office buildings and generic facades with. So this kind of stone-like sill and head captures these sheets of glass almost in an extremely rudimentary manner that we have been testing in the office and are developing further. So I think it's important that this glass can really dematerialize almost these bands.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the development of the quality of the building is a very rigorous process. We start with our own in-house mock-up and testing materials right through to pre-to-construction, full-scale mock-up, so that nothing in this particular area is left to chance at all. And we're very conscious that this building has to exhibit a consistent quality throughout the scheme. We want it to appear beautiful from the local context, but also from the distant context as well. And that's very critical to us. We don't want to present, we want it to be a unified item that is recognizable from the distance and recognizable up close as well. And then to emphasize this, another distant view, a verified distant view as well, which shows the position of our building in relation to Hinckley Heights golf course. So that's the building nestled in there, that's the surrounding context. We do expect this building to be seen. We want it to be seen and we want it to be appreciated from this position and from there as well. This is a night shot. Something just briefly to say about the night shot. This is also a verified image. We're using very low energy lighting. The building will only be lit when it's in use, incidentally, which there are certain times when it's in use. And the light emission from this building is very low because of its low energy lighting as well. And then this is our concluding image of the view from Walton Street, looking north. And I think we're up for time. Thank you.
Thank you, John, Simon. We're obviously aware that you have many questions do with the building, to do with the building process, to do with a whole number of other issues, and we're very happy to take questions on all of that. We want to take advantage of the presence of our architect to be able to talk you through the design process and explain why we are proposing a building of the type that we are. But please, I know you will, feel free to ask us questions about anything you'd like to do with it. So that's everything from us. I'm going to invite my colleagues, Chris and Charlotte, to come and join us, and we will await your questions. I think Father Jonathan is planning to get a chair this session.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul will be on hand with the microphone. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and we will get through as many as we can. If it seems like, I hope everyone will conduct themselves in a respectful and considerate and courteous way. I know feelings do run high in Oxford about planning, in this part of Oxford and others. We'll begin. So you are Chris.
What one really wants to know is what the nature, purpose, and practical applications of the Blavatnik building is going to be. What sort of students will it attract? Undergraduates, postgraduates, research students, international students? These are all relevant questions to those people who are living in Jericho.
Thank you. Paul will bring the microphone back to the front before whichever panel member is going to speak to that. If people didn't quite catch the beginning of Chris's question, I think I'm right in saying, Chris, that it's a question wanting some clarification on the overall purpose of the Blavatnik School of Government.
Thank you very much for the question, and apologies if my presentation was slightly telegraphic. And School of Government, which is dedicated to improving the quality of public policy. So the what works question is really about all aspects of public policy. Naturally, we have a specific focus at the moment related to the faculty who we currently have, but as the faculty grows, that will be broader. It is not limited to economics, for example, or just to politics. We have a programme related to science and global public health, and to a range of the challenges that the world faces, including climate change and other things. So it's the whole range of global public policy and international public policy. The students who will come to the school will be international as well and global. For example, in our current cohort of 38 students, we have students of 19 nationalities, including many from developing countries as well as those from the developed world. They are all graduates, and we have no intention of offering undergraduate programs. We will offer a one-year Masters in Public Policy, which is the current course that we offer, and we will shortly be offering a doctoral program to a small number of students undertaking doctoral studies within the school. The research, when I said it would be practical and focused on what works, the idea here is that many academic programs are deeply rooted in empirical evidence and in the specific discipline in which they are based. But many of the policy challenges require the integration of those different approaches in order to get to solutions. And so one of the goals of the school is to try and give effect to that, both in encouraging multidisciplinary study, but also in linking up researchers and policymakers in ways that the ideas of researchers can actually have real application to current problems. So that's what the research element is about. And the senior policymakers, we're talking about people at a very senior level. We, for example, the natural resource management program that I talked about will engage with energy and finance ministers from a number of countries and the very senior officials in ministries working on these issues. These people will come, we imagine, to Oxford for short periods of time for either courses or to convene for conferences and meetings for, in most cases, not longer than a week. But the goal will be to give them a very high-quality programme which allows them to learn from the experiences of other countries so as to avoid repeating the mistakes in their country. And as an example, Paul Collier, who is a member of our faculty, he will be leading that programme. Paul has been advising a number of governments, including recently the government of Guinea, on the exploitation of their natural resources, with the objective of ensuring that, unlike certain countries like Angola, they can really benefit from the mistakes that we made in the past and the things that have been done right by some countries like Norway in harvesting natural resource wealth for the benefit of future generations, not just for the benefit of a small number of current leaders.
Thank you very much, Karen. And we have a question from Emmett at the back of the side.
Thank you, John. I have no objection to the Blavatnik School of Government. I don't know Blavatnik. I didn't know him if I found him dead in my lunchbox. I've long been under the impression that Seacourt Towers and Saïd Business School and a host of others were about as poor an example of ill-fitting architecture that could go into Oxford. However, compared to this tall stack of weak old cowpats, Saïd and Seacourt look like the Taj Mahal. Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim fits very well in Oxford, in Manhattan, excuse me. It wouldn't fit in Oxford. This doesn't fit in Oxford. It might fit somewhere, but I wouldn't wish it on Milton Keynes. Thank you.
Can I just remind people that we're here to ask questions if I move out, and could we have the man who is standing just next to us in the middle of the aisle? Would you like to press? Okay, so the next question, please, from the man in the middle of the aisle.
There is a danger that discussion of a project like this can lose its way in a fog of competing opinions and subjective judgments. So I would like to offer a way of objectively assessing the impact of this design. And I have a very simple question. Is the scale of the model of your building the same scale as the rest of the model? Is it correctly scaled on the model?
Thank you.
No, I've got a supplementary question depending on the answer.
Yes.
I can take it, yes.
Okay, good.
The very first perspective, which was a line drawing that we put up, the viewpoint was from the top of Great Clanwood Street. It showed St Paul's Church, and it showed the proposal next to it. This bore absolutely no relation to the scale of the model. And I would invite people on their way out this evening just to remind themselves of how the building on the model completely dwarfs St Paul's Church and completely dwarfs the little school here. I take your point completely about bookends, but they can't both be right. The drawings and the graphic images show a building that is significantly smaller than the model. And if you don't want to take my word for it, come and check out the model. It's right here.
Is there a question?
The question is, which is right, the graphic images or the model?
Would you like to answer?
I think it's Chris Mealy with the town planners involved in the project. I think the answer is both are correct. That the drawings that have been submitted for the application have been used to generate this image through a complicated technical process. It's a verified view. It's not done by us. And the reason there appears to be a discrepancy is because you're looking at the street view here. It presents a certain perspective, and the recess of the height of the building creates that effect. So it's the result of the way we see things in images from street level.
If I could just add a word, I'm an amateur who knows nothing about architectural drawing, so I probably approached it as some others will have done this evening. And one of the things from that image that you were describing from the top of Great Clarendon Street is it's purported to be from the height of a normal person, so say 5'8", 5'9". And when you're at that height and that far up Great Clarendon Street, of course the mass of the portico of Freud's is closer to you, and you look up through it. So it's very hard, I appreciate, with the model, I was actually trying to do it earlier on, to place yourself, as it were, physically in that eye line. And of course, when you're further away, even if you go down and look at it, you're looking at it as if from a much further away distance, where you wouldn't actually be able to get that view because you'd have the OUP building to your right-hand side and it wouldn't be visible to you. So one of the challenges is to get an angle where you can actually appreciate the scale of the building. And so in that sense, it is a verified view. As you can see from the image that's on the screen just now, the height of it is not in any way hidden. You can see the height of the building appearing above the back of the schoolhouse there. And the reason it appears as it does is because, as the architect explained earlier, the building is recessed. And therefore, the perspective lines that you have, because the schoolhouse is nearer to you, it is recessed. So, as I say, it's a function of the perspective, in my understanding, that applies when you do these drawings.
Thank you, Carl.
Just really quick on that. In our architectural studio, our employers are always very kind of like strict about where you take an image from in a model, because we make a lot of models, and this is one of the first things we always train students that come to our office, is that to get on eye height in a model is crucial to get a correct shot. In a scale like that model, to get on eye height, you literally have to be 8 millimeters above the street level. When we take photographs of models of this scale, you need one of those oculus, like endoscope type lenses, which is something that can be done. But I'm just saying that that model is really a context model, and if we want to get kind of street perspectives with the model, there's another technology we need to use than just kneeling down.
Thank you. That helpful clarification. Lady from the front here.
I have several questions, but I'll just do one. You talk about when you're developing when you're developing the many considerations you've spoken very eloquently and sensitively about developing you've had a lot of considerations you've taken into account, creating what in many contexts is a beautiful building. You also used the word, you talked about fronting Walton Street, you talked about civics, you used the word civics quite a lot. I'm really interested to know, this is not a civic building, so obviously you're using civics in some specialised sense. And I wonder to what extent you took into consideration the impact that this has on the life that normally works around this area, the opening up of the business of the quarter by the demolition of the wall, and the considerable change this building will have on the everyday experience of this entire area. I've read a lot of your publicity and there seems very little consideration of the social impact of this building, and which is somewhat ironic given its function.
Well, the change is comes, I think, there is a change in the quarter that will represent a change, and I think our building.
Is this that mortgage business
Sorry. So we're hoping our intention is to add to the streetscape of Walton Street. Our intention, as we said in the presentation, is the development of the university in the quarter, combined with the Walton Street, is a particular design challenge. We think that we need to open up and not have the quarter as an instrument, and then this public realm offers an opportunity to create a linkage between these two conditions.
You made that very clear.
Yeah.
But just coming around to you, and I just wondered if there was any consultation about you absolutely appreciate the points that you've made from the perspective of the quarter and the business of the quarter. My question was about the social impact of the building, the everyday building of Walton Street, which is not a streetscape, to the people who live in it. I appreciate the need for objectivity and for the demands of your clients. I'm just interested in...
Sorry, I'm going to insult Chris on the subject of the consultation.
Just to the point about the site, the observatory quarter site comes through to Walton Street. There is a proposed new way on the south side of the site that will lead across, that will be publicly accessible. And the ground floor of the building is intended to have a single skin of glass so that the activity inside the building will be visible outside the building. And that's the way in which we can interact with the surrounding area.
The only thing I'd just very briefly add is, I fully respect the view, the point you're making about the separation, if you like, of the local community. In setting up the School of Government, it was our view, in the way the brief that we gave to the architect, that we wanted that to be something that was accessible to the local community and to the city as something that was taking place in that midst, and would hopefully in due course be dealing with questions of relevance to that city as with other cities. So, for example, one of our faculty members is an expert on housing in the UK, and will be doing work that is of relevance, I would have thought, to Jericho as to other areas. So the last thing we wanted to do was to be in that position, which is often the case for the rest of the university, of hiding the activities of the university behind closed walls, with no openness to the local community and no connection to the local community. But I appreciate that there are divergent views on that. Some people probably would love the university to be permanent behind closed doors and never to trouble it. Others will take the view that it's a positive and, if you like, a more modern step to have a more accessible university that provides that access to the programs and activities that are taking place. And I completely accept that is a matter of difference of opinion.
So what's the view that you already done in this?
I think we're going to come to another question. Thank you. If we can come to the lady just there behind.
Yes.
I've got a practical question. Do you know how much higher it's going to be than the observatory itself? I've got a question depending on the answer.
Lower.
It's lower.
It's lower.
It didn't look lower on the maquette you had there.
So the answer to that question is that the top of the School of Government is lower than the top of the observatory.
Right, my second question is, I know you say the light levels are going to be very low, but a library is a place that stays open quite late at night. And for all of us who live in these smaller, lower houses, it's going to be sort of a visual beacon viewed from our houses. I don't see how you get round that with all the glass you've got.
I mean, we're looking at the particulars of the lighting design at the moment, but in specific in relation to the library, we would be looking more towards local task lighting, as is typical of many libraries, which actually, if you look at some of the most notable libraries, precedents, the light levels, so overall light levels are actually quite low compared to the actual task lighting of addressing the page that you're reading or the computer that you have in the open. And I think it's kind of critical for us as well to maintain that have got this elevated position, we have this view over Oxford, and I think the success of the library at that scale relies on the low light levels so that you can, appreciate the view while you look, while you work at your computer and stuff. So we would be very mindful to keep those aspects very low down. We certainly would not be pursuing the very problem.
Thank you. The question, if we can go to the gentleman with the scarf in the middle of the aisle at the back, please.
I'd like you to expand on how you think you've taken into the context of being in a residential area, obviously, size, shape, materials. I just think none of that rings true at all to me. And I'd like you to expand. You're having some stone inside it. How you think that has any relationship to where it is at all.
Well, I think first, if you look at this image, the first idea of the building really is to reveal some aspects of the local site that in previous development were not to be seen, like the Freud side elevation, for example, from this view opens itself up. So in that sense, I think as a geometry, we try to acknowledge certain aspects of the site before we're in it. In terms of the material, as a starting point, we are very fascinated with what we call the mineral quality of Oxford. The idea of the eroded stone that can capture light in different ways. You can see it, Oxford during an overcast day has a very different kind of yellow sheen than it does during bright sunny days. So the stone has got ephemeral qualities, if you will, that we were very inspired by. So we use two main materials on the exterior, which is this kind of precast masonry elements that have a lot of limestone aggregate, actual limestone aggregate in it, and that will also have a texture and a variation that is akin to the limestone in the area. The other material we use is glass, which is a mineral material as well, which has been lightly touched on, plays with its surroundings, but it also has a play between the inside and outside, depending on the light levels inside versus outside. So behind this glass, we then of course have a cast-in-place structure, which will also have the same limestone aggregate. So the soffits in the interior walls all are going to echo, if you will, the kind of color palette of the environment. So we feel actually that material palette we work with is very specific to the site, and it's not a material palette that we have, for example, reused from other buildings in the past. It was very specifically developed for this particular site.
We come to the gentleman just here. Yeah.
Hello. Yes, I'm just wondering if the university would make a concession and lower this building by 2 stories.
Well, as I think everybody here knows, the planning application for this building and design has already gone in following the 2 public consultations that we conducted last year. And what we've been presenting here this evening are the rationale for that design. And as a result of this, we're seeking to persuade you that this details of its size. There have been various comments made about it. We just wanted to have a chance to share that.